Welcome. My name is Bruce Fulton. I'm Searles Digital Projects Librarian. I teach a few classes in the Digital Information Management program, mostly dealing with technology, so perhaps I'll see some of you later there. Today I've been asked to give you a brief introduction to social media. So we're going to talk about a few different concepts relating to social media. This will be kind of a brief introduction. I'm going to intersperse these slides in my commentary with several videos from YouTube and other sources that I hope will help amplify the concepts. There are also some readings. I've selected 2 readings from the popular literature and 2 readings from the peer-reviewed literature that I think will add significant support to what I'm going to demonstrate here and give you something concrete and tangible to look at. Our learning outcomes today. Want you to understand first some of the key theories underlying computer-mediated communication and actually communication across other technologies such as telephones and so on. These are really important to give you at least a little bit of foundation in understanding what social computing is comprised of, what social networking is comprised of, why do we choose to use the communication media we do. So I'm just going to very briefly go over some of those and give you a little bit of a foundation. Then we're going to talk about social computing, just briefly on social computing, what that is, what that term means. We're going to take a little bit of a longer look at social networking, what social networking is, what are some of the social networking applications. It's important to understand the emergence of Web 2.0. I'm sure you've heard that term. And what O'Reilly, and there's a reading by O'Reilly, calls the web as platform. I want you to develop a framework of understanding for describing social applications and social media. That is, what makes them tick, what are their underlying components, what makes one particular social application useful for this and another useful for that. So you'll take a look at kind of a formal framework for describing social applications. And then finally, all through this, I want you to explore, think about, discuss how businesses and certainly libraries and other organizations, museums, and so on, are using social media to build brand, improve products and service, and to engage customers. So that's kind of a summary of what we're looking at today. Let's start with some of these concepts in communication theories about how we use technology to communicate. And these have to do with what media we choose, what media is suitable for this purpose, what media is suitable for that purpose. And of course, much of this predates the modern computer. You can see the first 2 theories here, 1976, social presence theory, and 1987, cues filtered out, actually predate, certainly not computers, but definitely predate the web. So let's talk about these 2 theories first. And they both really say the same thing. The idea is that if you compare communication over a medium such as a telephone or a computer or some other technology device, there are a number of things that are going on, and there are other things that are not going on. One of the things that's not going on is all the nonverbal information you tend to get from face-to-face interaction. And so when you talk over the telephone, you're not seeing the expression on a person's face, for example. And so these 2 theories rank media according to the number of channels, and by channels we just mean, well, can you see it? Can you hear it? What are your other senses telling you? Number of channels available. And people select the most appropriate and efficient channel for the purpose that they're trying to accomplish. And so communication that requires really highly equivocal decision-making, complex things, maybe relationship things, require a greater number of channels, a greater amount of verbal and nonverbal information. And so face-to-face communication, for example, is at the top of this list. As you kind of move down the chain to telephones and so on, and then finally even just to, maybe a flyer or a poster or something or other, you have fewer and fewer communication cues. You sense the other person as an individual less. And so these tend to be suitable for task-oriented communication needs. For example, you wouldn't need to have a face-to-face meeting to announce a company picnic. You can just put that on a flyer or stick a notice up on the bulletin board and be done with it. So these theories basically are the first theories to talk about nonverbal communication, number of channels, and specifically what media you decide to select when you're trying to accomplish a purpose. Now that theory, those two theories were further refined by media richness theory, which actually proposed the mechanisms that were involved here. So this is really a continuation of the two theories I just talked about. The primary characteristics of the medium that they discuss in this theory: the speed of the feedback. In other words, is it synchronous? Are you talking to a person right there, or are you sending an email back and forth, or are you sending letters back and forth? In other words, is it synchronous or asynchronous? The number and types of channels and cues, and I talked about that during the previous discussion of the previous theories. The richness of the language, how complete that is, and the focus on the person as an individual. And this gets back a little bit to the social presence. How much is the individual there as a person? How much are you aware of it? And again, this theory suggests that people choose the medium that accomplishes a task most efficiently, yet in the most effective way. And this had a lot of application in the business world. They surveyed managers and what they used, what communication channels they used for different kinds of communications, and then they correlated that with how effective the managers were judged to be. And they found that managers who properly selected communications medium according to these cues and channels and how complex or equivocal the communication needs were actually rated higher if they selected these appropriately. Now, the issue with both of these theories is that they really don't explain some of what we observe. And so social information processing theory was designed to accommodate some observations that were made. So researchers, when they started to look at communication over time and analyze communication in greater depth, there is evidence of affective and interpersonal relationship communication in email, for example, which you might not expect from the other theories. And people develop colleagueships or friendships even in low Q, chat rooms. And then, of course, we don't see bulletin board sessions too much anymore, but they were still popular back in '92. It was sort of a maybe an early predecessor to Facebook, maybe you could say that, but evidence of verbal textual affective bonding. And what they found was that the computer-mediated communication could actually be as effective as more cue-rich communication medium when you allowed the experiment to progress over time. What they found was that it just took time for people to start to understand, what relationship management cues other people were using. And so people use emoticons, nonverbal substitutes. They perhaps manage text a little bit differently and manipulate text differently than they do face-to-face. And over time, communicators learn to encode and decode those cues. And so that would explain why we tend to have richer relationships in computer-mediated communication than the first three theories might have described. Now, interestingly enough, when they really began to look at this theory in more depth, we come up with hyperpersonal theory, and it's an extension of social information processing. And what researchers found is that under some circumstances, satisfaction with asynchronous nonverbal communication actually led to more satisfaction than other more complex relationships, including face-to-face relationships. And there are a couple of theories there are a couple of explanations for that. And we know that this happens. I mean, people, fall in love online and, build relationships, and they've never met each other or had a face-to-face conversation. And a lot of that has to do with impression management. That is, the sender is basically sending positive information because the communication is asynchronous. they have time to compose messages to put themselves in a good light. And so they send positive information, and there are no disconfirming cues. So you don't see the expression in a person's face when they're saying something which might, belie, the actual text of their words. And absent this disconfirming information, the receiver idealizes the sender. In other words, the receiver builds up in their mind an image of what the person is that they think they are, without any disconfirming information. And so this is hyper-personal. And that's all I'm going to talk about the communication theories, but I want you to keep all of these theories in mind. The first two or three theories I talked about are still valid in some contexts. We see that the social information processing theory does require communication over a longer period of time. So all of these come into play when we're talking about social computing, when we're talking about social media and our use of computers to communicate and network with each other. So that's all I'm going to talk about here, but just keep these in mind. I think they're really important to understanding the medium and understanding, how some of these social computing applications, social media applications, and so on actually come into play. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is social computing. I'm going to actually, over the course of this lecture, distinguish, I think three different concepts. Social computing is the first one. Social networking we'll talk about next. And then finally, social media. They're all related. These are not hard definitions. People will use these terms interchangeably. But there's some distinctions I'd like to make. Social computing in particular is used two different ways. The first way is a very general way. It's the use of computers to facilitate any kind of social interaction. So, any kind of computer program that allowed two people to communicate, have a social interaction, would be called social computing. And I think that's probably the more common definition when we talk about social computing. So Facebook is social computing, bulletin boards are social computing, the telephone might be considered social computing, I guess, today. Anyway, anything that facilitates social interaction. There's a more concise definition of social computing, which is to use computers and social interaction to actually compute things. This gets into, you may have heard the book, The Wisdom of Crowds, which is a book about how people as a group tend to be smarter than the individuals in the group. So if you want to solve problems, then you need to use groups of people to solve problems because you're banking on collective wisdom. And so social computing in that sense is using computers to leverage or harness the knowledge of many people and actually create new products or services. Lots of examples of this. Open source software, for example, is software that is developed in the open by people over time and generally produces really high quality results. So many examples of the use of computers to solve problems using social interaction. And so those are the two senses that we use that term. I'm going to pause now and let you watch a video by Brian Kellner. He's NewsGator's Vice President of Products, offering a take on social computing that I think makes sense. So when you are looking through the rest of this unit and thinking about social computing and some of these other topics, this is a kind of a simple approach to thinking about what makes this stuff work.
Brian, can you tell me a bit about what social computing is?
We absolutely hate buzzwords. So I think of social computing as I know it when I see it, and here are the things that I know that make me think it's social computing. It's really easy for the user. It's any action that's so simple that it adds value to me, and it's really low friction. But in turn, it's some value to everyone else. And so the simplest examples are things like tagging. So I tag something because I want to organize the content for myself. And then I've tagged it, and now everybody else can benefit from it. They can both find that content more easily, and they can find me more easily. So I don't think social computing is a blog, a wiki, an RSS, anything. It's wherever we smartly use one person's actions for the benefit of everyone else through software. And frankly, all software should be social.
Now, you can't really talk about social computing without talking about Web 2.0. Web 2.0 is a bit of a cliche, perhaps by now, but it was a very popular term when it was coined back in around 2003, 2004. It was coined by Bill O'Reilly. It largely is a marketing term, so it has a lot to do with business. But what it really does is talk about how the web has shaped itself since the dot-com bubble burst around 2001. The dot-com bubble, as you may recall, a lot of companies in the late 1990s were moving to the web. A lot of venture capital money was going to the web. All you had to do was put an E in front of your name practically, and you were getting showered with investment money. Well, all that crashed around 2001, and the companies that survived are the companies that managed to redevelop the web into what it is today. So we're talking about companies like Amazon, whose stock at first during the dot-com bubble was literally decimated, and then because of their ability to leverage social computing and some of these Web 2.0 concepts, is now one of the more successful companies around, companies like Google and some of the others. You'll read about those in the article that I have set aside for you as one of the readings. I'm not going to talk about the article extensively. I want you to read it carefully, but I am going to highlight a few concepts from the article, and then I'm going to show you a movie that sort of puts puts those words into action that I think you're going to enjoy. So let's talk about first the growth of the web as a platform. Before the dot-com bubble, you saw a lot of static pages. People would go to the web for information. They would see a static page. They'd read it. There wasn't any interaction. There were stores. You could buy stuff, but there weren't online customer reviews. There weren't really customer interaction. So the companies that started building the web as a social platform, maybe around 2003, 2004, really understood that what they were doing was providing not software applications, but actually providing a service. The service is based on data. Data is important. Google has its entire model built on the data that they have collected about all the different websites, and they've managed to leverage social interaction and social using social tools to rank their pages. So that's Google is the archetypal Web 2.0 company. A couple of other concepts then to talk about. We talk about the long tail. The long tail is the 80-20 rule put into the context of business on the web. Your traditional business, a retail store, for example, unless it's a huge superstore, has to limit what products they carry, and they carry the products that are going to be the most popular. And so there's a lot of stuff that is niche stuff that a typical bricks and mortar store won't deal with just because they don't sell enough to make it worth the space. On the internet, though, all that storage space is relatively cheap, and you can deal with a long tail. So rather than just concentrating on the little bit that most people are interested in, you can actually make a business out of catering to all of the relatively unknown niche stuff that only a few people are interested in, because when you add up the long tail, that whole end of the tail, it actually is as much business as the head of the tail. So doing business with a long tail is another hallmark of Web 2.0. Harnessing collective intelligence. We've talked a little bit about that before. That is social computing. We're talking about things like Amazon with their consumer reviews, getting consumers to participate about what's good, what's not, what's high quality, what's not. We want to talk a little bit about data. Amazon, companies like Amazon, companies like Google are collecting massive amounts of data on what you do, how you do it, and that gives them business intelligence. They can then focus much more closely on serving your individual needs, and they can do this in a very automated way. So data is really important. Big data are the terabytes of data that these big companies are collecting on you, your habits, and what you do on the web. Part of Web 2.0 is a rich user experience. That is, when you go onto the web, it's not just a static page, but there's sound, there's sight, there's multimedia, there are videos, all kinds of ways that you can interact with the site. And I think the big takeaway with Web 2.0 is that the web is actually you. It's an interactive web. It's interactive and it's two-way, which means that you are interacting with the site is interacting with you, and you are contributing to the experience. So with that, let me show you the next video. I think you'll enjoy this. This is Wesh's The Web is Us, using us, and then we'll come back and talk about some more concepts. Now, having introduced Web 2.0 and having watched the movie, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk at least a little bit about the concept called Library 2.0. Library 2.0 was a term coined by Michael E. Casey in a blog back maybe in 2005, expanded in somewhat more detail in an article in Library Journal. I've got the citation here up on the screen. I think it's just called Library 2.0. Didn't assign that for a reading. You may want to go take a look at it someday so that you're aware of it. But to make a long story short, Library 2.0 was one of a number of 2.0 monikers that were developed after Web 2.0 really took off as a term. So there was Education 2.0, and there was Business 2.0, and there was, anything that you could imagine with a 2.0 after it. So it was a very popular term. And the point that Michael Casey and later Casey and Sevastanyk and many others started to make was that in view of Web 2.0, we really needed to start to reconceptualize the library and how the library related to its users in the context of a computer Web 2.0 environment. And so they proposed that Library 2.0 is a new model for library service, that in part they were developing, building onto the long tail concept by reaching the long tail of library users. In other words, the long tail of users who weren't normally engaged with a library. That a lot of the social tools, things like blogs and wikis, are ways to engage customers and push fresh content to users. They wanted to talk about the library customer as a collaborator in the sense that Web 2.0 is a collaborative, interactive kind of an effort. And of course, then there's the whole idea of how libraries were beginning to deal with the real explosion of the web that occurred after the dot-com bubble burst. And as it turns out, the whole concept of Library 2.0, I think, while it was well-intentioned, turned out to be a little bit controversial. Some librarians were a little bit miffed that this was supposedly a new model for library service when they pointed out that, in fact, libraries had been reaching out to engage library users or patrons as collaborators, that they were already doing outreach to the long tail of users, that there are many ways to engage customers and that not all of the customers were going to be computer users. So the argument about Library 2.0 I think became a little bit contentious, and in fact it lacks really clarity of definition. Now I've included in the materials I wanted you to look at just a short two-pager that presents a number of statements about Library 2.0 and a number of definitions. And I'd like you to at least take a look at that, just give it a brief skim, and see what some of the people were saying about it and what some of the definitions were. I think the issue with Library 2.0 is that it's not clear that people mean the same thing when they talk about it. So whether it has, definitional rigor is kind of an open question. There is a Wikipedia article on Library 2.0, but there was a period of time where there was a long debate in the community about whether that should even be a Wikipedia article, whether or not Library 2.0 was a clear enough concept that it actually deserved an entry. The entry stayed; it's there, but it does note some of the controversy. So that's all I'm going to say about Library 2.0. Take a look at that sheet if you want to get together in your study groups and maybe talk about a few of those concepts. That's an exercise I've done in face-to-face classes before. You should at least know about Library 2.0. I think to a large extent now, it's been a while since these arguments, and I think libraries have probably moved on. I think, as you'll see, libraries are now extensively engaging technology in a number of different venues, and so the argument may be an old one, but it's one that you may run into and you should be aware of. Now let's move on to social networks. I'm sure the first thing you think of when you hear social network is the movie that they did about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's founder, The Social Network. But social networks actually is a kind of a broad field of inquiry within the social sciences, has a long history. And so it's not just about computers. So keep in mind the broader context of social network and research in social networks that go on, across the social sciences. Social network studies basically look at individuals and the nature of their relationships to others in a group, in group and out group, and there are a lot of ways to kind of slice that. Social networks are often graphically represented by nodes, which are the individuals, and links, which is the nature of the relation. So if you look at the little diagram down here, the little blue balls are individuals, and you can see that those individuals are linked to other individuals, or not linked, as indicated by the lines. Those are the link lines. And you can see that there are a couple of cases where two people are linked. The interaction between two people is sometimes referred to as a dyad, between three people as a triad, and then it kind of goes out from there. But keep in mind this general pattern of study for social networks as we think about social networking as it relates to computers and our kind of concept of social computing here that we're working through. So social networking when we're talking about computers derives from the general social science concept of social networks. That is, these are online platforms for social communication within and among individuals and groups. And so the computer social networks can be studied, analyzed, and interpreted just as the general case of social networks can. There are different kinds of social networks that have different functions and uses. We'll take a look at that a little bit later when we talk about how we identify and break down social media according to characteristics. So I'll leave that discussion for a little bit later. Social networking is really everywhere. If you think about it, it can be primary. Facebook is the example I'm sure everybody's familiar with. LinkedIn, which is kind of like Facebook, it's used primarily for business contacts, for job searching, I think, where Facebook is primarily personal, although there's much more business now being conducted on Facebook. Or the social networks can also be secondary. So Amazon is primarily a place where you go to buy things, but there are a lot of social networking components in there. People can write reviews, people can rate the reviewers, people can comment on things, people can form groups. So there's a lot of social networking on Amazon as well. I'd like to point out that social networks, both the face-to-face kind, or speaking in the general social sciences sense, and these social networking platforms serve to strengthen strong ties and expose or leverage weak ties, and that's a really important component of social networks. The concept of strong ties and weak ties goes back to the 1970s. I think there was a fellow named Granovetter who published an initial paper on it. And if you think of your own social network, whether it's Facebook or just your circle of friends, you have some people to whom you're very strongly connected, and this would be perhaps your family, your best friends, the people in your close-knit community. But you also have people in your network that are weak ties. These are your social acquaintances, people that you don't know as well. People who are outside your main circles but that you know, or that are people that you might not necessarily know, but you might have a friend that knows them. And one point that's often made with the strong tie, weak tie social network study is that the weak ties are often the source of new information. In other words, the people around you, don't generally contribute on a day-to-day basis with new information, with new outlook, with new ideas, with new concepts. Rather, it's the people from your distant network, the weak ties, that actually have the new knowledge that's brought into your group. And so in this sense, social networks, including computer networks, actually serve to increase your knowledge of the world in ways that can only be accomplished by extending your reach out, extending your social network, looking at the weak ties. And I think it's an important lesson both with social computing, perhaps with multiculturalism that I think you've already talked about in some early units, the strength and diversity that when you have a diverse group, you have people with a lot of different talents, a lot of different expertise, a lot of new knowledge, and that tends to strengthen an organization. So that's a very brief introduction to social networking. I'm going to play a short video. You can take a look at that, and then we'll come back and explore some more topics.
Networks get things done. Whether it's sending a letter or lighting your home, networks make it happen. To get from Chicago to Santa Fe, we need to see the network of roads that will get us there. We see that Chicago is connected to St. Louis, which is connected to Dallas, which is connected to Santa Fe. Of course, people networks can help us with finding jobs, meeting new friends, and finding partners. You know how it works. Bob is your friend, and he knows Sally, and Sally's friend Joe has a job for you. This is a network of people, a social network. Yay! The problem with social networks in the real world is that most of the connections between people are hidden. Your network may have huge potential, but it's only as valuable as the people and the connections that you can see. Boo! This problem is being solved by a type of website called a social networking site. These websites help you see connections that are hidden in the real world. Here's how it works. You sign up for a free account and fill out your profile. Then you look for people you know. When you find someone, you click a button that says Add as Friend. Once you do this, you and that person have a connection on the website that others can see. They are a member of your network, and you are a member of theirs. What's really cool is that you can see who your friends know and who your friends' friends know. You're no longer a stranger, so you can contact them more easily. This solves a real-world problem because your network has hidden opportunities. Social networking sites make these connections between people visible. Like a map for a highway, they show you the people network that can help you get to your next destination, whether it's a job, a new partner, or a great place to live. Your network is suddenly more useful. You can get started at these sites: LinkedIn, Facebook, and MySpace. I'm Lee Lefevre, and this has been Social Networking in Plain English on the Common Craft Show.
So you may be wondering how libraries are actually leveraging social networks. And I'm going to show you one example here. This is the Library of Congress photo stream on Flickr. Flickr, some of you may know, is a social network that revolves around photograph sharing. And so you can get an account, you can post your photos, you can tag them or categorize them, and then share them with other people. People can look at them, make comments. You can form groups around different kinds of photographs or different subjects and communicate about them. So this is a graphically, visually oriented social networking site. And the Library of Congress has been using it for a few years now to put up a number of their photographs from their collections. They have an extensive collection of digitized photographs, and they organize them, as you can see over on the right side of the screen. We're looking at some from child labor laws in this particular set, Civil War phases, gardening, pretty much anything. And so what they do is they put these up, and then people can comment on them. Now, some of these are comments that are just, talking about people's reactions to the photos. In some cases, people have actually been identified. Photographs have been placed in proper historical context. Maybe somebody recognizes the particular scene or so on. So this is actually a way of building information for the Library of Congress. We can take a look at this first example here on the left. The top left here, this Rhodes Manufacturing Company, Lincoln, North Carolina, about this little girl working in the spinning factory. We can see some initial information down here, and then take a look here at the notes and comments. And so let's click on that and see what we've got. Now this particular photograph has some areas that people have commented on. So maybe somebody's recorded something here. Here's somebody that's actually tagged a specific area of the photograph for commentary. If you look down here, the Library of Congress has included what they know about the print, the information that they have. And then you can see the comments down below. Most of these comments for this photograph are just, kind of reactions to the picture. Some commentary on it, but occasionally people do actually identify or provide valuable added information about these photographs. So that's one way that libraries can use social networking. There are many others. In part, that's one of your assignments to do in your groups, is to take a look at some libraries and see if you can identify how those libraries are using social networking and social computing. So I'll leave you with this example for now, but it's going to lead into a video that I think we also have to talk about the downside of social networking. And I think the video is going to speak for itself. It's a little bit depressing, but it's something that we as information professionals really need to be concerned about as we put this kind of information out there, as we put pictures of people up on the web. We have to consider how those pictures might be used and what the privacy and ethics issues are. So I'm going to pause my comments now, let you watch that video, and then we'll come back and start to wrap this up.
One of the best cases of citizen journalism in terms of effective documentation, uploading of when they shot the Japanese reporter, that went up on YouTube really quickly, and so it was one of the most documented and clear cases of human rights abuses that occurred, and all through YouTube and Flickr. Now, the problem with this is, so they first of all, once the government realized what was happening, they shut down the internet. This country had a single connection through the Seadrumar transcontinental underwater fiber optic cable, which I'm saying just because I found it interesting to say. But so it was possible to cut them off because they were a node on the net. They were just they were an island. So there's one point in, one point out from a network topography standpoint. The horror occurred a few days later when the government turned the internet back on, and they went to Flickr, and they went to the pages, and they looked at the tagged people, and they used the Flickr photo streams to identify individuals to then be targeted late at night when they would go to their homes and pull them out of their homes and make them disappear. And I actually cry. It's really very hard for me to even talk about, as a technologist, how it makes me feel to feel so wonderfully empowered. Like, wow, Flickr is helping change this horrible situation. But at the same time, can it then be immediately turned around? It is equally powerful to be used by the oppressive government. And that is an example of them interacting with that system as a regular user. I mean, like, there's some guy clicking, saying, oh, yep, print that out, handing those photos to people that are going to drive out late at night in trucks and capture and oppress people. It's horrible. And so the reason I say this is that collecting information is an intentional act, and it bears, or when you do it, you incur responsibility for doing it. And so it's something that we all have to think about, where when you tag someone's name, you provide this increasing database of personally identifiable information. It is entirely possible that at some point in the future that will be used against you in a way that you could never have imagined. And so, as part of this dialogue, the issues with dissident suppression in China by Yahoo, and to some degree Microsoft and Google, separate cases in each of those, but this is what happens when you amass large bodies of data and you don't think about the consequences of that collection.
So if you'd like to come back to it and view that site later at your leisure on YouTube itself, here's the link. We're going to look at an example of tagging later in the semester and libraries using tagging that I think is going to be a little bit more cheerful. Anyway, I hope you were able to get something out of that video and consider some of the issues it raises. So let's move on now to the last term that I wanted to discuss broadly. Social media. And I want to just be clear at the outset that this is not a rigorous term or definition. I'm using this in part just to distinguish some concepts. This one from some others we've talked about earlier, the social computing, and then the social networking. So when I talk about social media, and I think when others do too as well, the term is used this way, it really represents the current social ecosystem in which social tools, networks, and platforms operate. So when you talk about Facebook, or when you talk about social networks, or when you talk about social computing platforms, all of that kind of falls under this heading of social media. And it all is a kind of a ecosystem, a framework within which all of these platforms, applications, and tools work. And what I think I'm seeing over the last, especially over the last year or two, is that social media originally developed as tools primarily to promote social interaction, Facebook and MySpace and some of these other tools, are being increasingly leveraged by businesses. And they're being leveraged by businesses to engage users, to build brand, and collaboratively develop new services and products. And so you're seeing a real kind of a blurring of the boundaries here between applications that I think people have kind of traditionally thought of as being personal, sort of invaded by the business space, and the privacy issues. Of course, you may be well aware of some of the conversation around Facebook and Facebook's privacy, and now that they've gone public, increasingly using user data to target advertising and so on. I think this is to be expected. And I think that the issue here for libraries is, what should libraries be doing about this? Now, in a certain sense, libraries are a business, and library patrons are customers. Some people don't like that analogy, but I think you can at least make the case, for the sake of argument, that in fact, if libraries are going to be leveraging social media, they're going to be leveraging it in much the same way that businesses do. They're going to want to engage users, perhaps engage new users. They want to build the library brand. They want people to come to the library, to think of the library as the place where information and information intermediation is happening. They want to develop new services. They want to involve their users in building those new services. And so the social media ecosystem that I'm talking about here really is something that should be considered like businesses consider it, as a tool that libraries can use to accomplish some of these purposes. So my question for you, I think, is for the section is, what are libraries that you know of doing about this? How are they taking advantage of social media? Should they be taking advantage of social media? Is it ethical to leverage consumer information that they collect from users in order to engage in some of these services and so on? So that's food for thought. You're going to be seeing examples, I think, throughout the semester of ways that creative ways that libraries are using social media, and so you should keep that in the back of your mind. I'm going to play you a short video. I think will kind of frame social media and the case that can be made for businesses engaging users to build brand and collaboratively developing services and products. And then we'll come back and do one last section and wrap it up.
I'm sure you've heard the buzz. Social media may be the next big thing. What's it all about? This is social media in plain English. Let's take a visit to Scoopville, a town that's famous for ice cream. For over 20 years, Big Ice Cream Company has been making high-quality ice cream with a big factory in town. A few years back, the company did focus groups and found out that they could maximize profits by offering 3 flavors: chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. The residents of the town were content. They never thought it could be different. Then something happened in Scoopville. A new invention came to town. Suddenly, everyone can make their own ice cream for only a few dollars. This changed everything. The Smiths decided to make pineapple ice cream. The Joneses made ice cream with pecans. Soon, every kind of ice cream imaginable was being made by Scoopville's residents at very little cost. Of course, some ice cream was more popular than others, and that was okay. Sylvia's pickle ice cream had a very small but loyal following. That was fine. She only needed enough income to buy ingredients for her next batch. Jarrett's red velvet ice cream became so famous, he created his own store. Over time, people started to think differently about ice cream. It didn't always come from a factory. It also came from friends and neighbors. It became something to share, something to bring people together, something to celebrate. Big Ice Cream Company still made the best vanilla around, and to their surprise, demand even grew. But it was the unique, original, and authentic flavors made by the residents that brought people to Scoopville. When they arrived, however, there seemed to be a problem. There were too many flavors. Visitors felt overwhelmed. They needed ways to find the new, the popular, the flavors that were interesting to them. Franklin had an idea for his ice cream. Outside his house, he erected a board and invited his customers to share their thoughts on his ice cream. They could use words to describe it, stars to rate it, and leave messages for others. People loved it. At a glance, visitors could tell what his ice cream was all about and learn from people like them. Over time, each resident had their own board. Sylvia's board showed that her pickle ice cream didn't please everyone, but was very unique and interesting. Jarrett's board overflowed with positive reviews and ratings. Soon, a few things became clear. First, their ice cream got better because they could learn directly from customers. Second, free customer reviews were more valuable than costly advertising. And third, the boards created a way for customers to find exactly what they wanted. The combination of new technology and new ways to work with customers helped the residents feel like a unique community. So, this is Social Ice Cream, by the people, for the people. It turns out that ice cream and social media have a lot in common. Today, everyone has a chance to make their own flavors, thanks to free tools like blogs, podcasts, and video sharing. Plus, we now have new ways for real people to play a role in providing feedback, organization, and promotion. Whether you're a big, established company, an individual with loyal fans, or simply someone with ideas and opinions, social media means new opportunities to create and communicate with people that care. New tools are arriving in cities and towns around the world. When this change comes to your neighborhood, the choice is yours. What flavors will you make? I'm Lee Lefevre, and this has been Social Media in Plain English on the Common Craft Show. One more thing. The Common Craft store now offers downloadable versions of our videos for use in the workplace. Find them at commoncraft.com/store.
I'd like to conclude the lecture actually by hearkening back to the very first portion of the lecture, in which I presented some of the theories from communication about media, the characteristics of different media, and why we choose the media we do to resolve or solve a communication issue. And so if you'll recall, the Q's filtered out media richness theory proposed 4 or up to 4 different kinds of facets or characteristics of different media that affected how effective they were in particular situations and why we use them. And similarly, Keitzman et al. From the Kelley School of Business in one of your assigned readings has updated that and I think harmonized the current social media fairly well with some of the older theories of communication, in that he proposes that there are channels. He's arranged these in an array of a honeycomb of seven different channels that different media may be stronger or weaker in. Different platforms, for example, YouTube, may be strong in some of these. Facebook may be strong in some of these, and not so strong in others. And that kind of characterizes the media and helps define its use, helps explain why we find particular social media platforms useful for some things and not others. You can read the article. I want you to read it. I think it's easy to read, and he explains these characteristics fairly well. But I wanted to point out the harmonization of today's social media with what we saw perhaps 50 years ago with when we were first looking at the telephone and some of the other telecommunications tools that were coming into use, and to think about how we are social beings and how we use these kind of tools to manage social interaction. So read the article. I'll leave you with that thought. We'll finish off with one kind of fun video. And then please be sure to get back to me through the class if you have any questions or if you'd like to discuss any of these topics.
Now, let me see. Under the present Dewey Decimal System, this book belongs...
Wow! Look at all these books! Me never seen so many books before. Shh! Oh, yeah, right.
All right. Quiet, please.
I did not see wastebasket.
All right.
Excuse me, sir. Sir? Could you tell me what you're doing with all these books here?
Oh, why, this is a library. Yes, people come here to borrow books they'd like to read.
Oh, that's terrific. This library.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's great because me try hard to read.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
Now, what can I get you?
Well, me want a book about Little Red Riding Hood.
All right.
And 1 box of cookies, please.
maybe you don't understand. You see,
What?
this is a library.
Yeah?
Yes, we have books here. Only books. We have no cookies.
Oh,
you understand?
me see. Okay,
Right, very
okay. Then let's see. Me take book of nursery rhymes
All right.
and a box of cookies, please.
We don't have cookies. We only have books. Just books. No cookies. All right?
Oh no, yeah, right. Got it now. Okay. Then let's see. Me take picture book.
Picture book.
Yeah, and a box of cookies.
How many times do I have to tell you we don't have cookies? Only books.
Oh, okay.
Just books.
Okay.
No cookies.
Okay, no get upset. Okay, don't get excited. Me not fussy.
All right.
Just give me box of cookies.
No! We don't have cookies. No cookies. Just books. That's all. No cookies. Understand? Just books. Books.
You know what? Me get feeling you only have books.
That's right. Just books.
Me got it now. Okay.
All right.
Good.
At last.
Good.
Now, what do you want?
Me want book about cookies.
Fine. That we have. A book about cookies. Good.
And a glass of milk, please. A book about cookies and a glass of juice. You got some carrots? About rutabagas. You got any cantaloupe?